Hello guys and welcome to another video. My name's Mark, I'm an entrepreneur and property investor, and in today's video we're doing 7 passive income ideas that actually work. Things that I've tried and tested, and I'm going to give you the risk and the reward on each one, give you a bit of data in terms of how much I've earned so that I can give you an idea of how involved they are and what sort of returns you can get. Now before we get into the video, if you could possibly give it a big like, it really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, and if you haven't already subscribed, remember we do the subscriber dividend portfolio on this channel, which every single month I give away the dividends from my subscriber dividend portfolio. It's currently got about 2.5 grand in it. I think it's an update today, so that will have risen a little bit today. And every single month I chuck another £1,000 in, and all the dividends that come from that, we see it rise together, and then I pay it out to my subscribers every single month. So let's get into the video and let's talk about number 1 on my list, which is YouTube. Now you're watching this video here on YouTube. It's an amazing way of reaching a huge audience. But for me, it started as a hobby. And it really started as a hobby because I have a real interest and passion for investing and entrepreneurship. And I wanted to bring some of that information to as many people as possible. Now, your passion and hobby might not be the same as mine. You might be a world-class yo-yoer. Or in fact, as my son is, he enjoys carp fishing. So we're about to start a YouTube channel called Dad and Josh's Fishing Adventures. And on that channel, he's going to be able to document his journey, not only so that he can look back on those in future years and hopefully with fondness of the time that we spent together, but also there's a commercial reason for that. So if he manages to get to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, he'll start earning ad revenue. Now, obviously as the channel grows, there's other ways of earning revenue, affiliate marketing, there is brand deals, there's lots of ways of earning revenue. But for me, the real passive way is ad revenue, because that's reoccurring month on month on things that you've done in the past. So with YouTube, if I bring up a graph here, this is a month where I didn't post any videos at all. I took 2 months off YouTube, and you can see I earned about £20. I had about 2,500, 3,000 subscribers at the time. Now I've got about 4,500 subscribers, I believe, and that ad revenue in the background should be slightly higher because I've got more videos. So I would believe that if I was to stop posting tomorrow, I'd get about £30 a month in passive income. Now on months where I do post, as you can see, I restarted back in October and the ad revenues increased massively. I expect this month to earn about £800 in ad revenue. So now I'm doing work on it, I'm going to get some extra reward today. Now in terms of risk and reward, is it a lot of effort? Absolutely, you have to be willing to put the time in. But honestly, the rewards can be huge. If you look at some of the YouTubers who have made it big, multi-millions. And if you just think about myself, let's say for example, with 4,500 subscribers, I think I'm going to make about £800 in ad revenue alone. And we're only going to talk ad revenue right now. If we times that by 10 and say 45,000 subscribers, well, that'd be 8 grand a month. And if we times that by 10 and went for 450,000 followers, well, that suddenly would be 80 grand a month. Now we're earning £1 million a year on ad revenue alone. And I promise you, my brother runs a social media marketing agency over in LA. And they do video production and all sorts of things. They've got about 100 staff, so quite a big company. And that is the tip of the iceberg, the ad revenue. It's nothing compared with what you can earn on the brand deal side of things. Let's imagine for a second that my son's fishing channel becomes big in the carp fishing world. Well, at that point, brands are going to want him to review their equipment. They're going to pay him to give a review. They're going to pay him to use their equipment so it's on the TV all the time, or what is now the new TV, YouTube. So there's lots and lots of opportunity as the channel grows. So when it comes to the risk, we can work that out. Luckily, YouTube provides us with some data. 8.6% of all channels get to the magic 1,000 subscriber ratio. And then you need to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours to get onto the ad platform. So risk-wise, about 10% of people are going to make it. Now, if you're doing something you're passionate about and it's a hobby anyway, so for example, for me, talking about personal finance, I love doing this. I love talking about the ways that I earn passive income. I love showing people so that they can make better decisions if they want to. Obviously, you're all adults. This is not financial advice. You do what you want to. But it does mean that if you love makeup, doing makeup tutorials, if you love yo-yos, doing yo-yo videos and instructional videos, fishing videos, all these things you would be doing anyway. The only difference is it's a camera and you document it. And for me, it's brought a new perspective to everything. So from a risk perspective, I think it's basically zero risk. I think anyone can do it with an iPhone. In fact, I was only using my iPhone until I had 1,000 subscribers, and then I upgraded to a camera. So I think there's very, very little risk if you would be doing it anyway. In terms of reward, it's massive, right? It's literally into the millions if you become big. So for me, I'm gonna give it a £5 rating. This is the Mark Parham rating. £5, that's as high as it goes. The reward is massive, the risk is zero. So YouTube is my very first thing. Find something you're passionate about, put out the videos, get on that ad profile, and then you've got passive income from your back catalogue for the rest of your life. Let's get on to number 2. So number 2 on my list is index funds. And anybody who knows me and likes this channel knows we have the subscriber dividend portfolio, which is almost exclusively invested in index funds. But I'll just give you a brief overview on why we use them and why I think it's a fairly low risk, fairly low reward, kind of set it and forget it type of investment, but one that makes up quite a big proportion of my portfolio. So basically, if you buy the S&P 500, you buy the 500 top companies in the US, and over the period of time, as companies become more successful or less successful, the fund automatically replicates the index by selling or buying different stock positions depending on their weighting. So you're always representative of the index. Now the S&P 500, for example, has an average annualized return of about 10%. People argue it's 11 or 9. I know the official data is like 11.8 because you look back into 1960 and that's roughly what it's returned annually. Dividends reinvested, of course, but that is roughly where it's going to be, 8 to 10%, something like that. So if you were to invest, for example, £1,000 into that, you would make £100 per year on average, not every year though, on average though, as a return. Now, I also like investing in dividend portfolios and dividend funds. So I've invested in the Vanguard high income dividend yield, and that yields out about 4.5%, 5%, something like that. So for every £1,000 I put in that pays me about £50 a year. So if you put £10,000 in, it's going to pay you about £500 a year. And if you're doing it in an ISA wrapper, it's tax-free. So you can scale that up as high or as low as you want. Now, obviously, if the value of the companies drop, the value of your investment drops. If the value of the companies increase, the value of your investment increases. So for me, index funds make up a good proportion of my personal portfolio, and this isn't a recommendation, this is just a reality. I think they're fairly low risk, although I know people will argue that they're fairly high risk because they're stocks and they're volatile, and because they are able to go up and down in value, people would argue they're high risk. But out of 5, I'm going to give it like a risk rating of 2. Like fairly low risk, long-term type stuff. Not a lot that can go wrong if you buy the entire index or if you buy the entire global economy. As long as you hold it for long enough, and we're probably talking 5, 10, 15, 20 years here, then there's not a lot that could actually go wrong. In terms of reward, it's pretty low reward though. I've invested hundreds of thousands of pounds. I get about 10% a year on average. So if you invest 100,000, that's only going to give you 10 grand a year. I say only, but that's a lot of capital to have saved up and invested. So fairly low risk, fairly low reward, as you would imagine. But for me, far more interesting than number 3, which is bank interest. Now, bank interest, I don't need to explain to anyone really. I'm just going to do what the risk and reward is. I mean, basically, it's very low risk, in fact, 0. In the UK, we have up to £75,000 worth of protection for every single bank that we have. So if you only have £75,000 saved with one bank, the government underwrites the whole lot. The reward is a pittance, it's nothing really. In fact, I'm going to put basically 0 reward. It tends to be lower than inflation. If you look at inflation at the moment, 9, 10%, something like that, and the bank interest rate is currently, I think, 3.5% on a cash ISA, it's lower than inflation. If you go back a year, inflation was about 2%, and bank interest was 0.1%. It's lower than inflation. So you're almost guaranteed to lose money. So for me, bank interest, I've got no interest in it whatsoever. I'd rather put it into index funds and bonds, property, all these other things that make a bit more money for me. But I understand if you want a bit more certainty, there's basically 0 risk here, but the reward is also basically 0. Bonds, again, quite interesting to me. I do these in Hargreaves Lansdown. I have, I don't know, about £15,000 worth of bonds in my personal name and about a similar amount in my wife's name. And that gives us about 50, 60 quid a month, depending on the month. So we have it in three main places. We have it in the Artemis High Income, which gives an interest payment of about 5.5%, 6%. We have it in the Royal London quarterly one. The Artemis one's monthly, so we quite like that because it's every single month. The quarterly one's the Royal London one, and then the low fee one, which is the majority of our portfolio, is the Legal and General inflation-linked index bond. So that's a very, very low fee, and it's about 5% return. So in terms of risk and reward on bonds, again, probably slightly less than stocks, although have a look at the moment, bonds have been absolutely killed as interest rates have risen. Reward, slightly lower than stocks, so about 5% return. The risk rating that I'm attributing to this is kind of 0 for the lowest, 1 for the middle one, and for the highest one, a 2. So really, risk and reward playing out as it normally does. You know, risk is guaranteed, you're always going to carry the risk. The reward isn't guaranteed, it's potential reward. And it's really important you always remember that, in my opinion. We always talk about more risk, more reward, but it's not. It's more risk, more potential reward. The risk is guaranteed, the reward is potential. And that brings us on to number 5, property. And on this one, I've put your home. And the reason I put your home is because I think that owning your own home as an investment quite often is a smart idea for most people. Not for everybody, but for most people. Now, for me, I bought my first house in 2010, and we made money out of it in 2 ways. First of all, we bought it for 176k, and today it's worth 425k. So there is a big capital gain there. We still own it, and we refinanced some of that money out, which we now have in cash, tax-free, because it was a loan. So we made money on the value of the property increasing over time. And in the UK, property prices tend to increase by about 4 or 5% per year, every year. Now, some years they go down by 15, 20%. Some years they go up by 15, 20%. But if you took a long-term view, 4 or 5% a year is about average. And a lot of that's to do with inflation, right? If inflation's running at 3%, it costs 3% more every year to build the house. So nice and simple, right? Of course, they've got to go up in value. The cost of the bricks is more. The cost of the kitchen's more. Of course, they become more valuable. So over a period of time, you can expect, on average, to make money in property. So just by owning your home, it is likely that the mortgage, even if you paid interest only, let's imagine I had a £100,000 mortgage and it was interest only. Well, I've still only got a £100,000 mortgage, and the value difference has changed, okay? So the mortgage value has gone down because of inflation, not in nominal terms, but in real terms, and the value of the house has increased in real terms, so as well as nominal terms. So you win 2 ways. But the other thing that we did there that was really smart, and I would encourage people to do, because I think this is a big thing for us, is we rented out our spare rooms. So we had 2 spare rooms. We rented them out for £500 per calendar month. We did that for a couple of years. That's an extra £1,000 a month. And you can do that in the UK to, I think, 6,500. I'm just going to Google this. So yeah, I was absolutely wrong. It's £7,500 a year. You can have completely tax-free by renting out a spare room. And for me, when my wife, when we first started, it meant we could buy our second house much, much quicker. So for me, property, you're going to have to live in one anyway, right? Either you rent or you own. I think if you own, your rent is about the same cost when it all works out. Maybe you pay a little bit more for renting because you've got to pay someone else's margin. The reward is pretty good though, over a long enough period of time. Now, if you're buying a property and you might want to sell it in 1 year, 2 years time, I would probably rent personally. Again, this isn't advice, this is just what I would do. If I was going to move in a year or 2, I'd rent. If I was going to buy and hold though, and for me, every property we bought, we're going to hold for our entire lifetime. So we have a generational viewpoint. I think you can't lose over a generational viewpoint. That's my personal opinion. I think that's a long enough period for inflation and everything else to take place and for you to win ultimately. So property, I think it's a very, very low risk because you're going to need somewhere to live anyway. Mortgage or rent, about the same. It's just your viewpoint in terms of time to whether you should buy or rent. But if you can buy and hold for a generation, I think you're going to be quids in. My 6th one on here is investment property. So as you know, I've got about £3.5 million worth of investment properties, and they're rented out. And obviously if the market goes up or down, I make capital gains or losses. but I don't make them because I don't sell them. So everything we buy, again, is bought for generational wealth. So for me, I'm just dollar cost averaging. Every single year, I'm buying a certain amount of property, I'm buying a certain amount of index funds, buying a certain amount of bonds, and then just dollar cost averaging that over my life term. I know that ultimately, if I buy assets and I finance liabilities, over a lifetime, I'm going to become more wealthy than the average. So for me, it's just putting those good habits in place. Investment property, I think they carry a higher risk because you wouldn't need to have one anyway. So if we imagine buying a £200,000 house, putting a £50,000 deposit, now if that £200,000 house reduced by 25%, it'd be worth 150. Well, your entire deposit is wiped out because you still owe the 150. Now, that's why investment property carries higher risk, in my opinion. If you're doing it on your home, well, you're still going to have to pay your monthly payment, aren't you, on your mortgage, and you're still going to live there. You would have to live there anyway. Investment property is slightly different. It's an optional purchase, and unless it cash flows really well, those sort of ups and downs could be more detrimental to someone's wealth. I'm going to put that carries a much higher risk actually because it's leveraged. I'm going to say it's about a 4, but again, the potential returns on that are exceptional. And the reason that they're exceptional is the illustration I just gave you can also happen the other way around, as it did for me. In fact, it more than doubled, and therefore I put down, I think it was £20,000 as a deposit, and we made 300 or close to 300, £250,000 worth of profit. £250,000 out of a £20,000 investment is ridiculous, right? So I think in terms of risk and reward, probably pretty balanced yet again, but high risk, high reward. I think people have to have quite a lot of cash to really get into investment property. I would start more around the index funds and bonds way before I went into property if I was starting again. Grow and automate a business. Now, the risk on this is like through the roof. It's like the hardest thing to do. In terms of reward, it's also the highest reward. There's no question. If you can build a company, I don't know how many pound signs I put in there, if you can build a company and that company becomes successful and is able to support you for the rest of your life, it is without question the best way to become incredibly wealthy. It carries the most risk because most businesses fail. It's just the reality. Most companies are going to fail, but if you manage it, the rewards are really there. I've got several businesses that I'm working on at the moment in order to build them up and automate them, but my experience so far is you have to get to quite a big size. We're probably talking 200, 300 people before you can really automate yourself out of the business, because you have to have so many levels of management who are trusted within the organization. So I think it takes a long, long time. It's high, high risk, but it is high, high reward. Those are my 7 examples of how to do it. And the other thing I'm going to do just quickly is how much cash you need. So for YouTube, you need 0 cash, right? It's very, very easy. Index funds, you can start with £25 a month, bank interest. A penny goes in and you start earning interest. Bonds, similar, £25 a month. Index funds and bonds, pretty similar. Home property, probably minimum of 10 grand, probably more like 20, 30 grand. Investment property, definitely 20, 30, 40 grand, and that's even for a very cheap property. And growing and automating a business is generally a lot of your time and quite a bit of money. So that's my overview of passive income ideas that work. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Drop me a like if you've enjoyed this, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We give away the dividends from our subscriber portfolio every single month, and I really hope to be able to see you guys in the comments. Comment below, I'll answer every single one. See you soon, guys.